Saludos a toda la afición de Lucha Libre Online. Este que les habla es Michael Morales Torres, integrante del equipo de Lucha Libre Online. Y hoy tenemos un privilegio muy especial, gente. No todo el tiempo se da en este tipo de ocasiones y queremos presentar a nuestro invitado especial en la noche de hoy, directamente desde Oklahoma para el mundo, integrante del Salón de la Fama de la WWE. Gerald Brisco llega aquí por primera vez a Lucha Libre Online. Mr. Brisco, it is an honor for us to have you as our guest. How are you doing today, sir?
I'm doing wonderful, and I appreciate that endorsement there that you gave me. I wish I could understand all of it because I'm sure it was full of compliments and everything. But it's an honor to be on this podcast. It really is. You reach more of our fans than anybody else out there. I appreciate the hard work that you do for this.
Thank you for your kind words, and I'm more than humbled to hear this, sir. Thank you very much for those words. I wanted to start this interview asking you, you were an amateur wrestler prior to being a wrestler yourself. How comfortable you were with the transition? Because back in the 60s, to be a professional wrestler, you had to quit your actual amateur career. So how do you make it work?
It was very, very strict back in my years. But thankfully the internet wasn't around, cell phones wasn't around, and mass media wasn't around. So you could kind of, especially in places like Oklahoma. Now in the big cities, it might be a little bit more difficult to do. But out in the country where I was going, in these little spot show towns, we used to call them, little high school gyms and armories and stuff like that. During the holidays, my big brother was already in the business. He started in 1965, shortly after he won a national championship at Oklahoma State. And I was still competing in Oklahoma State myself. But in the summer times on vacation, I'd go on road trip with my brother, just to see what it was like. And believe it or not, every once in a while, somebody would wind up hurt and they'd need a substitution. Well, I was a college wrestler. They knew it. So they'd show me how to do a headlock, how to do an arm bar and wrist lock and all that stuff. And say, go out and listen to the heel and give me 20 minutes. So I go out and work. So that's basically how I started in the business, how I started working.
So you already had a clue of what to do once you entered into the professional wrestling industry. Back then, things were really different. When people didn't like you, they simply could broke your leg. So you needed, to be prepared for that thing. We have heard the Iron Sheik Hogan story, among many others. As a youngster inside the wrestling industry in the 60s, in the late 60s, do you felt threatened at any moment by the rest of the industry, by the rest of the guys in the locker room?
Yes and no, because there were some badasses back in those days, and guys that they looked upon, and here I was. This is in the 60s, mind you, and I know back in the 60s, I don't know if you're all that old, but back when you were young, when I was in the 60s, we both had a head of hair down to here. So, I was one of those college hippies, I came with the bell-bottom pants, the fluffy sleeves and all that stuff. And, but I had a lot of challenges because I was a college boy. And number two, and most importantly, because I was a college boy wrestler. You think you know how to do this already. No, sir, I'm just here to make some money. That's all. I come from a family of six with a single mom. And we had a new address every 4 months because, we couldn't pay the rent. We'd get evicted, have to go to another address. So, I had no problem with the philosophy of our business. You lay yourself down, you get beat, But I knew I had no problem with that, no issue with that, because I knew I could beat any one of those son of a guns that was across the ring from me.
You made team with your brother as well for a while. So you had someone to take care of you as well. You took care of someone while you were starting your career. How do you felt working with your brother, the Brisco brothers, inside the wrestling industry?
Well, I'm gonna let you in on something that I think Jack covered in his book, but I've never really been asked that question. That's a great question because, when I started, like I said, Jack started in 65. Well, Oklahoma, as a true wrestling fan knows, it was a small territory. You didn't make a lot of money there. My brother was married, had 3 kids already, so he had to make some money. So as soon as he got good enough where he felt that he could travel, he took off to Dallas, went down to Dallas, worked in that territory for a while. So by the time I'd started full time in the business, my brother was already gone. But we'd made this plan. I tell you, we'd talked about it. Hey, we both got an opportunity here. You go your way for a while, and I'll go my way, because everybody told us, single guys are the guys that make the most money. Tag teams, they're usually double main or semifinal or something like that. So unless you're really good, and so neither one of us was really good at that point. So we kind of made a pact: you go your way, and I'll make my fame, and then vice versa. And as it ended up, Jack and I really weren't designed to be a tag team until later years, until actually the Funk Brothers come along. And we'll get into that, I'm sure, a little bit later. But having Jack as a mentor when I first started, and when I first started, and was working just here and there and off and on, not full time, I had him as a mentor. I had him as somebody I'd go out and have a match. And I knew when I got back to the dressing room, I'd get my ears chewed out with blue language and everything, because he wanted me to be better. Yeah. And I was fortunate enough to have that. Did some of the guys look at it as favoritism? Oh yeah, and some of them tried to take it out on you. But like I said, I've been wrestling since I was 6 years old, so you better bring a good hold with you when you come into the ring.
So in the 60s, it was hard to make a living from pro wrestling due to the quantity of money you earned, at least in the Oklahoma state. When do you started making a decent living inside the wrestling industry? How many times you had to wrestle a week in order, to live from pro wrestling?
I was very fortunate. Because of Jack, Jack had gone to Australia and had gone to Japan. So right out of the chute, on his recommendation, and me being an amateur athlete, I was fit. I was made for Japan, because I knew how to wrestle. So I made a trip to Japan in my first year, and then right when I got back, I got a phone call from Jim Barnett to go to Australia. Well, the first deal he offered me was for 3 months.
Oh,
then
wow.
He called me and offered it to me for 2 months, But I was going to go. I'd already told my friends in Oklahoma, hey, I'm going to Australia. So he could have cut it down to 1 month, and I still would have went for $1. I would have went to Australia, So I got to go down there, and I ended up spending a year down there. Wow. And in that year, I met like Killer Kowalski, I met Buddy Austin, I met Rip Hawk Sweethead, Playboy Gary Hart, Don Jardine, some of the greats in the business, Dominic DeNucci, Spiros, Orion, name them, Killer Carl Cox. They all passed through at Australia that year I was down there. And I was picking up little tips and little ways, and they all took a liking to me because I worked hard and I wanted to learn. And like I said, I never had a problem with, because I was an amateur wrestler, I never had a problem with that hand up or hand down. I just wanted to make some money. So they saw that in me, and they took the time to help me out. And through that experience, after a year, Rip Hawk and Sweet Hats, and they were going back to North Carolina, and they were the star. They were number one heel team in North Carolina. They really liked working with me. And so they said, hey, when you finish up here, why don't you come to Charlotte? We'll get you a good spot on the card in North Carolina. So I come down to North Carolina, Portland, Oregon, and San Francisco. Well, I knew Pat Patterson was the top guy there. So I wasn't gonna be the top guy. I knew Ray Stevens was another top guy, and I knew I wasn't in their league at that time. And so I kind of eliminated that, even though I was really kind of favoring wanting to go there because it was San Francisco, California, and I was from Oklahoma. So I kind of left Portland and Charlotte. Well, Rip Hawk, I really grew to trust and like Rip Hawk. He gave me his word that he would bring me in on a good spot, which meant, he was going to bring me in on a main event spot. So I called Jim Crockett Sr., and I got booked in Carolina, and Stayed there for 4 years before I made the move down to Florida. And during that time, and now that's how we started becoming a tag team, because I'd never worked tag team before, but North Carolina was known as a tag team. They threw me with Sandy Scott, one of the greatest technical wrestlers of all time. That was my first real full-time tag team partner. Man, I started learning so much. I learned everything. Sandy Scott was such a great teacher, a great mentor, and I owe him so much. And so they decided at that time there, well, break him off because Sandy was wanting to slow down a little bit. So they broke me off into the single, and I had my single run. Well, during that time, Jack was exploding down here in Florida, you know, and had a feud going with Dory Funk. All of a sudden, Terry Funk comes into the scene. Hey, let's make a tag team. So they call me from North Carolina, and I come down here. And the Briscoes and the Funk, we started 20-year rivalry. That's probably one of the greatest rivalries in all time of professional wrestling.
Which leads me to my next point. You know, there's Hogan Savage or Hogan Andre. There were many rivalries that marked our life during those period of time. One of those was Briscoes versus Funks, which lasted for over 2 decades. How important for Gerald Brisco, not only the athlete, but the human, was this rivalry, was facing the Funk brothers, creating friends in the process, creating their eternal enemies, and at the same time, you know, climbing another step in your career and taking it to the next level?
Well, yeah, it's exactly right. Every one of those. The Funks was very important, and we were very important in the Funk's career too. And Terry, I talked to Terry probably 3 or 4 times a month. I talk to Terry, and as much as I can nowadays. And he needs your prayers and everything. He's healthy as a goat, but he still needs your prayers. And so, but Terry and Dory, they were so important in my career, my brother's career. Dory kind of opened the door for that next generation to come along. He beat Gene Canesi, the old school generation. All of a sudden, here comes a younger college type athlete, mind you, not a big bulky guy, but an athlete who could go with any style. And that kind of opened the door for my brother, myself, Terry, and a lot of other guys later on down the road. So with the Funk's influence, with Dory Funk Sr. and Dory Funk Jr., they opened a lot of doors for guys like me coming out of college that were younger, and that younger generation to show the promoters around the country, hey, give these young guys a chance. They can draw some money. Sound familiar, doesn't it? It hadn't changed, in other words.
Mr. Brisco, you were not only a wrestler, you were a businessman inside this industry. And as a businessman, at one point, you and your brother held a percentage of a company called Georgia Championship Wrestling in the 80s. We're stepping a little bit on time on this one. Why did you decided that it was the moment to not only be a wrestler, but to actually invest in wrestling and own a part of wrestling?
Well, that's a great question, but a very simple question, very simple answer. My brother and I were both college educated guys.
Yeah.
We knew when you reach a certain point in athletics where you just can't go anymore. And a lot of guys don't prepare for that moment. And it comes faster than you realize, brother. It's boom, and it's getting that time. So we knew that we would have to have something to fall back on. So we started investing in properties. We made some money in properties, made enough money in properties that now we could start another step. So some stock came available. And of course, Jack was the first one because he was making more money. He grabbed some Georgia stock, then he grabbed some Florida stock. Then some more stock came open. I elevated myself a little bit, and I was able to cash in on the opportunities. But we always knew that, hell, if you don't invest in your future, who's going to invest for you? The promoters back in those days didn't give a damn. After you reached a certain age, it's next, come on in, So we knew that you'd have to have some other opportunities if you wanted to live the rest of your life comfortably.
So as a businessman as well, you made a huge decision for your career in the 80s, I believe in 1984, and that was to actually sell your part of the company to a young guy rising up called Vincent Kennedy McMahon. And you decided at the same time that the best decision for your career as a businessman was to enter the World Wrestling Federation at that point. What motivated you to create that alliance, sell your part, and enter the industry to basically change it forever? This company.
I tell you what, just set the tone of the deal and what was going on at the time. Wrestling was really hot at that time. I mean, WTBS Channel 17 that we owned the contract for, and it was exploding around. Cable TV was supposed to be the devil, the diablo of the business. It was going to wipe out the business, and it did. That's one thing that promoters knew it was going to happen, and it happened there, but they didn't prepare the right way for it. So Georgia Championship Wrestling was so hot, it was making stars. Other promoters would send their guys in from other parts of the country and put them on Channel 17, WTBS, and make a star out of them. Well, at the same time, Vince McMahon Sr. got cancer, and he started passing. And so who's going to fill those shoes there? So Vince Jr. stepped up, and Vince didn't hide the fact that he wanted to go nationwide. Well, my brother and I, once again, as we said, we weren't dummies. We saw the opportunities that we had. We saw the opportunity that cable television being hot in every major city in the entire North American continent, And man, let's take advantage of that. We got the vehicle to do it. Let's don't let this evil man up from up north do it. But we had some partners that were so loyal to the NWA that it was not going to happen. And we didn't have enough votes and enough stock to do it. So we created a plan that we could get the voting proxy of certain shareholders and put us over that 50% threshold that you needed to have the majority with. So we were able to figure out how to do that. We did it. We did the obligatory good deed, I thought, my brother thought, of making the offer to sell our stock to some NWA members. And each time that we approached one of these NWA members about buying our stock, our offer was sabotaged by an insider of our company, of Georgia Championship Wrestling. So that deal never came through. And so one day we're working for Jim Crockett Jr. at the time. Roddy Piper had already left and gone to Vince McMahon, and he was working the Madison Square Garden. He cut his fingers. We thought we'd heard he'd cut his fingers off, possibly his career. So we wanted to call Vince to find out how things were going with Roddy. We were doing promos at Jim Crockett's office. So we go in Crockett's office. He said, I'm not calling that something. Bet you guys called him. So Jack picks up the phone, calls Vince. Vince picks up the phone right away. Hey, Jack, how you doing? Hey, man, you and your brother want to make a move. He said, by the way, are you guys still interested in selling that stock? And Jack, he said, I know you can't talk, but if you say yes or no, we can, you can call me later on. He said, we can talk and or yes. And so he said, why don't you call me when you get home from the office? Jack said, okay. So we couldn't wait to finish our deal. So we talked about it. If we do this, it's going to be the worst thing in the minds of all of our friends. I mean, you got to realize we'd spent our entire career in that NWA. I mean, all of our friends was there, but also on the other hand, most of our young friends that we had already made the move to Vince McMahon, to Roddy Piper, Don Morocco, the Greg Valentine, and all Hulk Hogan. They'd already gone up there and were making a handful of damn money. So, and we said, well, we're not going to be able to expand like we want to. He's going to do it. So why don't we, reach and send him the olive leaf up there and say, yeah, we'll consider it. So we had a day off coming. So Vince privately flew us up to New York, and we made the deal while we were up there. It's really as simple as that. And it was just an opportunity to take care of my family for a long period of time. And I chose that over other things.
Mr. Brisco, before they were creative staff member, there were agents or road agents. Creative staff, it's basically WWE's creation, and you had the incredible privilege to be part of the original creative staff table. There was Pat Patterson, there was Bruce Prichard, there was Vince McMahon at one point. Hugo Savinovich jumped in for a few months, but you had the privilege to be part of that team in the owner's house, in his mansion in Stamford. What can you recall about those days, those meetings, those late meetings until you finally made everything click?
It was surreal. It really was. I mean, once again, I'm a little country boy from a little bitty town in Oklahoma, man, and here I am in one of the most powerful men in the industry's house, and I'm not only there, I'm there as a friend and an employee, and we're starting on the ground floor building this damn company, and Pat and Vince and actually George Scott was an original part of it too. They had really laid a good foundation. So I come in after that foundation was laid, and I got to help put the cornerstone onto that company and build it. But I think back on it now, and it was totally surreal that I had that opportunity at where I come from and my upbringing and all that to be a part of that building that dynasty and that empire that become a global enterprise that it has today. And I look back on it as really proud. And a lot of people said, if you had that opportunity to sell the stock or do it yourself, what would you do? If they'd gone the other ways and the guy said, okay, you got a good idea, let's take over the country. You know what? I'd be sitting in Vince McMahon's chair because I know I would have worked as hard as Vince, and succeeded. But at that time, I saw his game plan and I saw how he would do it, and I became mighty happy that I didn't try to challenge this man because I found out what he was made of, and he was made out of hard work, determination, and somebody that was set to achieve greatness, and he did.
How was your relationship with Pat Patterson? He was a dear friend of yours until he, fortunately passed away not long ago. You shared so many memories with that man inside the industry and outside the industry. He was like a brother to you. How was Pat in real life? How was having him as a friend?
I first met Pat Patterson, like I said, when I was young, and I had an opportunity to leave Australia, and San Francisco was one of them. He was one of the reasons why I did go there, because I knew his greatness in the ring. I didn't know his greatness outside the ring. I was aware of what he could do inside the ring. And so my first run across Pat, I was in the Omni in Atlanta, Georgia, and they were putting the Southern Heavyweight Championship on me. And it was one of those phantom type belts like the Intercontinental. Pat mysteriously wanted in Rio de Janeiro, and the next night he's in Atlanta, Georgia, defending against me. And so that was the first night I met Pat. He come in to put me over to make me Southern Heavyweight Champion. So I won it. That was my first night. We went out in front of the Omni, 17,000 people. And I said, Pat, he was one of the guys that really didn't like talking over a match. He said, just listen to me out there. Let's fill the crowd and let's work a match like that. Well, that was music to my ears because I love that too. That way, you could get that emotional reaction from the people because you got them. Yeah. And we built that match where we had them in the palm of our hand. Pat put me over, and I become Southern Heavyweight Champion. I didn't see Pat again for several years. He went on up to Vance, and I came down to Florida. And then after a few years in Florida, Pat came down and became assistant booker in Florida, and him and Ivan Koloff formed a tag team, and my brother Jack and I competed against Ivan and Pat all over the state of Florida for like months on end. We had a great program, sold out all the venues around the state here, and started becoming personal friends with Pat. That's when I really started getting to know Pat and become personal friends with him. Well, Pat had a little issue down here. Eddie let him go, and he went back to New York. So I took Pat's place as assistant booker down here with Johnny Valentine. So And then when I went to New York, I already knew Pat. I was a little nervous. I didn't know Bruce Pritchard at all. J.J. Dillon was a part of that original crew too. And I knew J.J. from being down there. I knew what a good guy J.J. was. And I knew if I had any issues that I could go to J.J. and talk with. Here I'm coming to New York now, and I'm still young and I'm cocky as hell. And I think I know a lot of stuff, and so I'm sitting down at these booking meetings at Vince's house, and you can talk to Vince, and you can argue with Vince, but you can't get controversial with Vince. You can't get really in his face, and without him getting angry with you. But you can tell him he's wrong and tell him why you think he's wrong. But you better have a good reason and a good solution to correct it there. So we get in these endless arguments, me and Vince would, about certain philosophies and issues that he wanted to do and I wanted to do. And our philosophy wasn't always the same. So you don't want to ride back one night after a pretty heated night with me and Vince. Pat said, he said, come on in the bar. I want to sit down. I want to talk to you about something. I said, okay, sure. So I'm thinking I'm getting fired. I got too much heat with the balls and I'm going to get fired. Pat set me down and he said, Vince really likes you, don't you? And I said, I don't know why. How do you know? He said, because he puts up with all your bullshit. I said, wow. He said, but you know what? It's going to come to a point where you're going to say the wrong thing and you're going to be out the door. Do you like what you're doing? I said, I love working up here. I love working with you guys. He said, here's how you work with Vince. So Pat took me aside and he taught me how to work with Vince McMahon. And I think that's the reason I lasted for 35 plus years, because of how Pat set me down and talked to me on how to work with this man, how to soothe him, how to get in his face, and how to get your way when he didn't want to go that way. And there's certain things you got to do. I mean, just like with anybody, you got to know the system. But Pat taught me that system.
Man, so many memories with just one person. Speaking of memories, there's only a handful of selected talent that get inducted into the WWE Hall of Fame. Gerald Brisco and Jack Brisco had the opportunity to get inducted. Not in any class. Ric Flair, High Chief Peter Maivia, Soul Man Rocky Johnson, Mae Young as well was there, Eddie Graham, and I believe Gordon Soley was the other person on that class. To you, as a person seeing that moment, that pinnacle on every person's career, how do you felt knowing that you finally were on the Hall of the Immortals?
It's still sometimes it's still hard to believe, that I was selected to be one of those honored inductees there. And it was a thrill. And, the class that I went in with, everybody thinks they have the greatest class, but there's only one Ric Flair. There's only one Gordon Soley. There's only one High Chief Peter Maivia. And I got to go in with those legends, and along the side with my brother. What was very special in Orlando, Florida, where we became stars, and really where that road to WrestleMania began was here in Florida. So to cultivate it with a Hall of Fame induction, it was goosebumps, brother.
Mr. Brisco, you were on the WWE now for almost 36 years, if I'm not misunderstanding, a full life. 3 decades dedicated to that company. And let's not talk about the sad part or the unfortunate part that was,
I got no sad part. I got to work with some of the greatest people in the world, some of the smartest production people in the world, some of the greatest backstage people in the world. Our camera people, they not only do WWE, they do Super Bowls, they do Masters Golf Tournament, they do the World Cup. They do every big event that comes along. These guys are the tops of their profession. So to sit there with 36 years and be a part of that and kind of even be a director of all that, I mean, it's a rush and it's a memory that, people want me to knock WWF,
No.
WWE. I don't, there are certain things. Do I like everything they do? No. I like everything they did back when I was there? No. But you know what?
It's like marriage.
Sometimes that happens. So, but I got nothing but good things because of the relationships and the friendships and the experiences and the wealth of knowledge that I gained there. I gained so much as a person, as a man, as a businessman. I think that's part of my success, my long-term success. I just turned 75 years old, and man, I'm still out here kicking it. And I owe that to the WWF.
You are now working with John Bradshaw Layfield on a series of programs that are definitely on everyone's mind right now. We've seen it getting quotes everywhere. People are talking about it because you're talking about life and about the industry as raw as possible, no pun intended. Why do you decide, along with JBL, to tell your side of things, to tell your vision of the industry, and to basically, make public what you really think about things?
Well, JBL and I were talking today. I mean, we're discussing this week's podcast, which is going to be a knockout. It's going to be one of those X bangers, if you know what I mean. A little hit, So we're really excited about number one, the guests that we have on aren't guests. There are true life friends. I mean, they're guys that we traveled hundreds of thousands of miles with, shared these stories. Some of them we're with them when these stories happen. So, this all in the beginning of the pandemic. You'll remember Brisco's big announcement. I mean, I just started. Everybody needed a smile. I was sitting out here all by myself with my wife, my family, on a little farm I have out here in the country. And, I was bored and I needed to laugh. I needed to share some good times with people. And people needed a little relief from all that 24/7 news that they were sitting in front of that television, just getting choked out emotionally every day. So come and turn on that Twitter and watch 2 minutes and 12 seconds. That's all Twitter would give me, 2 minutes and 12 seconds. And I tried my best to entertain you. JBL was doing the same thing. You can only do those things by yourself for so long. So JBL's a smart ass Texan. I hate to give him credit because he's a Texan, but he's a smart man. So, he gave me a call. And he said, hey, Brisco, we're doing the same thing. He said, why don't we do these things together? Well, I'd watch some of John's work, and John is so smooth. And he's one of those television face guys, talking heads, that on Fox Business News and all that stuff. I knew how good this guy was. And I know I'm not the best in the world. And I know my accent drives a lot of people crazy, and I don't give a damn. And he said, why don't we do this together and just make people laugh? We'll tell road stories. You got some friends, I got some friends. We'll call them and see if they want to share their story. And if they do, we'll do it, just have some fun. No money involved, no motives involved, just to go out and entertain people and ourselves have some fun ourselves. And so we started doing this thing. People tell me it's the most positive thing to hear on podcasts, especially wrestling podcasts, because we don't go after any dirt. We don't do. I hate that term, shoot interviews. We don't do anything. You got a beef, you can talk about it, but we're going to get off the subject pretty damn quick and go to something positive in your life. Let's think about what happened to you positively. Not that negative stuff. We've had a few guys on that didn't have the sparkling up reputation that some of the other guys have. And we get the comments after listening to your podcast with so-and-so on there, man, I got a completely different outlook towards this guy. Because we let them tell their side of the story. We let the people see what we saw in them as we were traveling down the road with them, why we become friends with these guys. And I just think that's what people want to hear now. Not everybody. A lot of people still want to hear that dirt, that shoot shit. But, you ain't going to find it with Brisco and Bradshaw.
I love the stories. Michael Hayes. It's not that common to see him on programs. And I thought I knew many things about wrestling, but when he said that the Freebirds were actually the ones that introduced music to the wrestling industry, it blew my mind, because previous to that, it didn't happen.
Yeah.
Pete Gas was there as well. Medusa, Ted DiBiase. I mean, there's a great line of guests. So to all our fans out there, go to John Layfield's YouTube channel. Basically, you can find everything on JBL's YouTube channel, as well as on Gerald Brisco's social media. You can find him as Gerald Brisco. Gerald Brisco as well has his own YouTube channel, even though he doesn't post the links and everything. But we love the videos with the necklace and stuff. Randy Orton did this, for example. So you can just follow him.
That was another great thing. And I got my good friend Taylor Williamson, the comedian that's on America's Got Talent. He was just on a reunion show here recently, but he helped me produce all that stuff. So it's just like, here's an old man. I don't know how to push all of it, but I don't know what to do. But I made friends with people that did. And I'm not wasting my time getting old, brother. I'm wasting my time learning stuff and enjoying myself. And guys like Taylor and JBL, they help me enjoy life. And I think it's going to give me a long, long positive life,
Before we go to our last question, I wanted to thank you so much for your time. Obviously, reminding their fans to follow Gerald Brisco on social media, like that, as simple as that. Gerald Brisco, available on Instagram, on Twitter, and YouTube. Like, literally, go for it. The FJ Brisco is the username. It's that easy. Just go there, follow him, and see what this man can apport social media, which is a lot of comedy, a lot of memes, a lot of things. Not only about pro wrestling, but if you want to have a good laugh, go to his Instagram page. Like, believe me, it is worth it. Last but not least, you've achieved so many things inside your career. Since 1967, 68, you've been inside this industry. Once you look back at that amateur wrestling, as a kid, 6 years old, 7 years old, and you see the man you are today, and you analyze your career and the things you've done for this industry, did you ever thought in your wildest dreams that you were going to achieve so much and change the industry as much as you did?
Well, I'll tell you a quick story, because I know I'm running a little long here, and I get a little long-winded because I'm old, and I think I tell stories, but I got to tell them my way. When I was about 8 years old, I was in a little town in Oklahoma, about 3,000 people, called Blackwell, Oklahoma. I don't know if you know what an F5 tornado is. It's not that one that Brock Lesnar used to spin these guys around, but maybe that's where that thing got its name from. We had two of them come through our hometown in 20 minutes. My grandpa, we were all in a cellar. A cellar is a hiding place underground. You dig a big hole and you fill it up. You put wood over top, fill the dirt back up over top. You put a door with a rope on it. You hope you can hold that door down. Well, these two F5 tornadoes coming through my hometown, 30 some odd people were killed. My grandpa's holding on to the rope, and that door's flapping up and down. You don't know if you're going to get sucked out of that hole or not, I mean, you're not thinking about WWE Hall of Fame at that time there. So, no, I mean, not my wildest dream that I think that guy in that tornado shelter would ever be standing on the stage in front of a global audience accepting a Hall of Fame award.
Wow. Like, that's a wild story. I want to close this interview with something that actually Pat Patterson said to me, and that is stuck with me in my mind. Don't you ever allow someone else's history decide your destiny. And that's what you did. You came from Oklahoma as a young kid, as a young wrestler. You experienced the good, the bad, and the ugly in the industry, but you never allowed someone else to tell your story. You were your own voice. You were the voice for many people as well in your generation and in future generations. And from the bottom of our hearts, we wanted to thank you so much for what you've done for the industry, for what you are keep doing for the industry, and for sharing your stories and your time with us here at Lucha Libre Online, sir. Thank you. It's been an absolute honor. Wishing you success, health, and peace in your life and in your career, sir. Thank you very much.
Peace out.
Peace out. Y let's wrap this up en español. Este fue Gerald Brisco y Michael Morales Torres para Lucha Libre Online, la marca número 1 de Pro Wrestling y Combat Sports en español.